Good evening. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting in the Round Lake Area School District Board of Education on February the 5th, 2024 at 7:18 p.m. If I can get started first with a roll call, please.
Miss Lee?
Here.
Mr. Francisco?
Here.
Mrs. Larson?
Here.
Mr. Jewett?
Here.
Mrs. McGinley?
Here.
Mr. DeVera?
Here. All right, and our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first up, we need to get an approval of the meeting agenda in front of us. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Larson. Roll call, please.
Mr. DeVera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Motion carries. We have an approved agenda, and first up on that is communications to the board and our BPAC update.
Good evening, everyone. This is the update for BPAC. We continue providing free mental health seminars in English and Spanish to all parents who want to learn how to find counseling resources and how to support their students' mental health. Our next seminar is Friday, February 9th from 6:30 through 8:30 p.m. at McGee Middle School. We start planning on our Dads in Education conference on Saturday, April the 20th from 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. We want to start learning our roles as fathers in our students' educational journey and how to support their students' achievements. Also, we continue learning about academic topics. We have our BPAC seminar on February 16, 6 to 8 p.m. at McGee Middle School. We as parents are going to learn about types of assessment our children need to take and how to support our students during assessment weeks. Psychologist Fernay Ramirez will share 5 strategies parents can use to support their students at home during assessment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, as always, for that. And now next up is our new website live tutorial.
Okay, good evening. We spent some time during the Community Engagement Committee this evening reviewing our new site that will launch live on February 26th, just a couple weeks out. We did talk about some adjustments that we'd like to make inside of the new site, but tonight I just kind of want to give you a general overview of what it looks like. So here we're on our home page, and each of the school pages will have a similar structure. So up at the top we have directory. You can search by location or by name. Sorry, it'll be faster when we go live. This is kind of like the back end. Up at the top we have our lunch menus that will take you to our breakfast and lunch menus along with nutrition information. Our calendar, which you can sort by district and any of the schools that you'd like to see. Then next to that we have a prominent location for registration. That's always a big one on our site. We have a search field. At the top, obviously, this will take you back to district home anytime you're on another page. And then our schools are at the top right by level. So our elementaries, if you click that plus sign, it'll show you all 5. Same with our middles. And then once you go into the schools, you'll see a similar structure just with more specific information about that individual school. On the right, we have a menu that has a lot of information. We're still in the process of analyzing the information that we have on these pages. I feel like there's still a lot here under each of them. If you scroll, you get another sub menu. So we're going through these and we'll continue to go through these even after we go live to make sure that it's concise. Maybe there's some opportunities to be combining information so it's a little bit easier to follow. So again, just scrolling here, you can see the different items under the menu. On the right hand side, there's a parent portal button that will take parents directly to the Infinite Campus login page. Staff portal is the directly to our staff intranet. And then contact us is information about the building's address, phone number, etc. The pictures here will be scrolling. I think maybe they are here, but you can also click the button here to go to the different images. We'll be sure these images are more appropriate for the time of year, not Halloween costumes, but those will all be updated. There'll also be separate stacks of pictures by district and schools. When you scroll down, you'll see kind of some buttons that are regularly visited pages, easier to get to just by one click. We did talk through these tonight, and we may be making some adjustments here. Maybe adding some, and if not, maybe taking some out and replacing. And we can change this throughout the school year. So if there is something that's more prevalent at the start of the school year, like maybe school supply lists are up at a certain time and they come off later. Then we go into our upcoming events. So here we have all of our district events. When you get to the school pages, you'll see district-wide items here, but also school-specific events. And then this button will take you to the full calendar as we have now, so you can see the full year calendar in one shot. News and announcements. If you look at the site right now, we have only district news in here. Once we get through the webmaster training, which will take place over the next week here, there will be specific news items for each school. So when you go to the beach school page, you'll get the beach news instead of all the district items here. And then you can scroll to the different topics with the arrows here. And then each of them gives you an opportunity to click to get more information if that's available. Under here is the district showcase. So these are really just photos, an opportunity to highlight events that have occurred in our district and at our individual buildings. Again, right now these are all district showcase, but once we get through the webmaster training, we can customize the individual school pages to have their photos here. Down at the bottom, you have links to your social media pages. So for the district, we're on the district page, that'll take you to our district socials. On the school pages, it'll take you to the school accounts. And then we have, again, up at the top left, an opportunity to click there as well. And then the translation, right now it's just showing two options, English and Spanish. It's not the correct Spanish translation that we want. This shows the flag for Spain. We'll be changing that to more of Mexico Spanish, and then we'll be adding some other options in there as well for different translation options. So like I said, we have webmaster training over the next week or so, and we'll be making our final tweaks over the next couple of weeks based on feedback that we received from our principals, our webmasters, tonight at a community engagement, and then we'll be ready to roll on the 26th. We'll be preparing a video tutorial just to show families around once we're about to go live that we'll be pushing out through various communications, social media, newsletter, etc. So any questions on this brief overview?
Any questions from the board? Looks very good. The one question I do have is, does that also come with an update to the app as well? Will there be app-based updates and a cleaner look on the app?
There will. So once we go live, our app will look different. I don't believe there's any need to like upload a different app. It should just be a conversion of what we have. I haven't seen that. The focus has been this, but we'll be sure that that's clean and ready to go by the 26th.
Thank you.
Can when we do the are we going to get another look, or will it be, hey, it's live?
We're able to share with board members this link so you can see it. It's not live. Obviously, if anybody searched it, they wouldn't be able to get to this. But once we make the finalized adjustments, we can definitely share it out with the board before we go live for a final look.
Because this is desktop, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to. Are we able to actually get the look at what it looks like on the phone?
I'll check. We should be looking at that. So
You're talking about looking it on your phone, but not the app, correct?
they're responsive.
Yes, the responsive I don't know what the right word is, but yes. I know what
The
you mean.
built-in browser on your phone.
Yes.
Well, but to Scott's point, it makes it look like an app. It converts it. I know what you're talking about, but it's on the browser.
If we're gonna look at it and get a preview of it, it would be nice to see it in the way that most people are gonna see it, which will be on their phone.
Yes, we'll be sure. So phone, iPad, other non-desktop versions.
But Heather, phone on the app and browser, because
All of the above. Perfect. Thank you very much for that. And next up is a review and conversation regarding emergency closing procedures and e-learning expectations.
So Dr. Rollwing's coming around. This is a joint presentation. I'll be going through the emergency closing procedures, and then he'll cover the e-learning expectations. As you know, over the last few weeks, we've experienced some interesting weather and building situations that led to, I think, 3 days of e-learning opportunities right in a row. So we had cold, we had snow, and then we had a busted pipe sprinkler situation at McGee. So we were asked, I think we started having the discussion, having 3 days in a row like that. It was a time that we needed to start and reassessing our e-learning strategies for our emergency closing days. I think we had some questions here at the board table as well, asking about where we were with that. And we worked really collaboratively with our union leadership team to develop new expectations going forward. So we'll start with the emergency closing procedures, like I said, and so here we'll start for reasons for closure. So snow and ice, obviously those are big ones and not always easy to predict. So we're always watching those closely, utilizing the tools that we use regularly here. We do have some established procedures for things that guidance that we follow for wind chill warning and wind chill advisory. Temperature is a little bit easier to forecast. So the tools that we use are often right on with what they're anticipating. So in the times of temperature, cold or hot, we're able to manage that a little bit more in advance than we are with snow or ice. Sometimes we have HVAC issues, flooding, fire, power, air quality. We saw some of that last summer. And then there's always some sort of other emergency that we might run into. A couple of the monitoring systems that we use, weather.gov is what we use as a district to monitor snow, ice, temperature, wind chill, all of that. It's a great tool for us. It's been very accurate. And then last year we started utilizing airnow.gov. That is the air quality. Last summer we saw quite a bit of that during our practices and games that we had scheduled over the summer months. The operations team is key to our decision making. How well are we able to keep up with our properties if we have ice and or snow? How are our systems working? And then Public Works. So Dr. Lamping is able to connect with our local Public Works teams of the really 5 different villages that we work with to monitor how things are in the community. And then Dr. Mendoza works really closely with area superintendents just to see what are they doing, how are they responding to the different elements. The types of closures that we've had to date is one is a complete closure. So if we are not able to do any type of e-learning, so it's really just your traditional old school snow day, everybody's off. We have an e-learning closure where two different situations. We might have everybody, with the exception of our essential employees working on our properties, working remotely, and our students, but we also might have an opportunity where, like we had with McGee, with the pipe situation, staff were able to come in and use the building, but students were remote. And then we do have the 2-hour late start option. Different communication tools that we use for emergency closings. We try our best to make all decisions on the current day no later than 5 a.m. In the past, I think we've done a pretty good job in trying to determine plans for the next day the evening before so that families can make arrangements. We send information on closures through email, text, auto call. We have a website pop-up. We add it to our website calendar, social media. We contact our local police and fire to notify them, and then we know that the park district has the before and after school programming, so we do have a direct connect with them whenever we need to make those decisions.
Just a couple comments before Dr. Rowing presents. Probably 10 years ago, when superintendents had to deal with this kind of thing, we didn't have access to the technology we do now. None of us wanted to be first or last. None of us wanted to call it first. None of us wanted to be last. I don't personally, when I have to make this call, which I'm the one that's ultimately responsible, I don't really worry about that anymore. I feel like I just want to make an informed decision. A lot of times the districts around us, maybe that aren't as big, kind of look at what we're doing, so they wait. But I just want to reiterate to the board, I think if we know the night before, I think we've done a really good job of trying to notify so parents can plan. The other thing I would share is cold is the easiest and ice is the hardest. We dealt with the ice last week. As I sit here thinking about it, I'm not sure I got it right because it's village dependent. You have different villages that have different levels of staff out at different times of night. Like, for example, I was driving from McHenry County and the side roads and the main roads were all clear, but I could hear salt trucks going at midnight the night before. That one is a little bit hard, but we do the best we can. The last thing I would share is more of anecdotal. I could probably collect. I know what every other district is doing. We have 45 districts in the county. I would say 30 to 35 on the shared document we have end up putting information in there. Some never do. Over half are doing e-learning now. It's definitely a majority. I don't know if it's quite 60%, but it's the old snow day versus e-learning day. Well over half are doing e-learning. I just thought you should have that information. So, Dr. Rowling.
All right, so I'm going to be presenting on the e-learning expectations. Currently, what we have was developed during the COVID-19 remote learning timelines. We, as Ms. Bennett identified, based on the frequency this year and some questions from the board and community and ourselves, we wanted to reevaluate those. So currently it is all asynchronous via Canvas. Teachers are asked to add relevant lessons to their Canvas. The instruction should be about the equal amount of time that they would be spending in class. When students are working independently, obviously know that can vary based on each student. We have lessons designed for each course subject at the elementary level or each course taught at the secondary level. And they are posted by the start of the daily schedule. So about if you use 7:50 at the high school, it's got to be up by 7:50. And by state requirement, we should be looking for 5 hours of work. Right now, the students are not penalized if they don't have access to the internet. Their attendance is based on completion of assignments, and they're given 1 week to do that. And then the last thing is teachers have 2 periods of open hours or office hours, we call them. 2 30-minute periods, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, where they have to be available for students. Now, we went ahead and took a look at that. Based on, we've been doing this for a while, some of the things that we thought might be more prevalent situations during the COVID outage, we really find are not barriers for most of our students. So we wanted to find something that would provide more authentic instruction that we think would be more impactful for our students. So these are the preschool expectations. We'll kind of run through each level, but I want the themes that you're going to see are synchronous periods led by teachers with student attendance, followed by asynchronous periods where students are working on their own. Part of the reason for that is one thing we do know is an entire school day sitting on a computer is not necessarily beneficial for students, right? And so we try to look at the developmental level of each group and identify something that would kind of walk that line. We want to make sure we're providing rigor, but at the same time, we want to recognize what our kids are really capable of doing via this model. So at the elementary level, at the preschool level, we do run 2 sessions. So each session will feature a 40-minute synchronous lesson. During that time, teachers will be doing some of their morning meeting activities. They will be doing read-alongs and then prepping the students for some asynchronous activities that they can complete with their families. We are taking attendance by looking at who is on the screen with the camera on. Teacher assignments will be assigned to support individual teachers by our building administration. And then teachers have a normal PLC time, professional learning communities. This is our collaboration time built into the contract and the daily structure. We will not have those meetings on these days to allow our staff to focus on prepping and getting this lesson and everything ready to go. So if we move on to PLEVAC, now this is going to be a short-lived one, right? Hopefully we don't have to use this one this year. We'll see. But we do have a 10-minute live morning meeting where teachers will do some of the things they do on a regular basis and then prep the students for the day. We will have 4 instructional periods to cover the 4 core areas with a 5-minute break in between to let kids, use the restroom, take a break, whatever they need to do. We'll all take a lunch in the middle of the day, and in the afternoon, they will have asynchronous specials lessons. So this, that would be music, PLTW, library, art. They will, in the morning, create video lessons that they can then get out to the kids. And then in the afternoons, our teachers will be on an open Zoom to support our students. So they need to be available for students and families to help with that support. All the other things essentially remain the same. Our related service and interventionists, which we don't necessarily have as many of those at the EEC, they will work to meet with their kids during their normal meeting time. So we'll have to collaborate with teachers, but we don't want our kids to miss out on those services. If we move on to grades 1 through 5, it's arguably the same, right? A 10-minute morning meeting, 4 core subjects. Now they have their asynchronous specials before lunch just because of the timing and when they start school. And then in the afternoon, we have open Zoom support again for all of our students. So asking our teachers to be available as our kids and families try to navigate asynchronous learning. But many of the other factors remain the same. As we move into middle school, obviously that model changes quite a bit between elementary and middle school. So what we have here are beginning at 7:25, we run all 8 periods in a row. They're 25-minute periods with a 5-minute break. So students will follow their schedule. This leaves a lunch in the middle of the day, and then in the afternoon, open Zoom support. And again, here we have teacher assistants that might float between classes a little bit more. The administration will work to put together a schedule for support. And then at the high school, we will follow essentially the same model, beginning at 7:50, running periods 1 through 9 in our 25-minute periods with a 5-minute break in there. We will have a lunch and then open Zoom support. So all of those other factors, attendance, what's expected of our teachers, what's expected of our students, that all remains the same across all of the levels. We vary a little bit on the length of the period and the length of the day based on the developmental needs of our students. And then at the transition center, where they run a slightly different schedule, now we will have a live homeroom to help our students settle in, know what they're going to do for the day. We will run our periods 1 through 8. That's a little unique in that students are oftentimes out of the building at a work site for 2 periods at a time. They will not have to attend during that time. So the teachers will talk through with the students, here's what your schedule is going to look like today. But again, following all of those other factors, we provide the lunch and then open Zoom support. So that one we will start with in the afternoon. They have their life skills and employability skills. We're going to start with the period of the day where we have all the students in class and then adjust from there. And so those are the new e-learning requirements. We put them into effect Thursday. We put them into effect last week. And so hopefully, again, we don't have to do this year, but if we do, we will be implementing those. We will be meeting with our RLAS partners to look at what our expectations are for the professional development e-learning days and trying to increase the rigor and relevance for that too. That should be forthcoming in the coming months.
We're ready to go with the new e-learning plan. We haven't communicated with families yet. We wanted to bring this to the board first for any feedback or questions that you have, but the plan is to communicate with them tomorrow once we get through this presentation.
Let me ask one clarifying question. So e-learning days that are pre-scheduled for teacher in-service days would not be following this. It would be basically the way it is now.
Well, they would not be following this. And the reason they can't follow this is because we have the staff in professional development activities during the day, so they can't be synchronous with our students. We are going to look at increasing the rigor and some of the expectations to make those days more relevant for our students, making sure that what we're providing is at a high enough level that we believe they're continuing to learn.
And volume. We don't have it all worked out, but we are going to be looking at the monthly frequency. Just for some background information, I think that's very important. We tend to do it once a month, and we're not that specific model. It might be unique, but the idea of a full day per month for PD is not unique to the district. My daughter works at Big Hollow. They take 2 half days a month. Where I live, they have late start Mondays. So it's really about what's best for families. Is it, the late start Mondays, that district is not a unit district. So that would be an inconvenience, I think, for a lot of our the elementary families. For high school, it's more acceptable because a lot of those kids drive or they can carpool. I think the one thing I want to highlight is before we went to this model, we actually had about 6 professional development days, 6.5. And the other thing, and you saw the survey results, we are asking our teachers to do a lot of things, and there's definitely a balance of what's the right amount. We've tried this model. I think it's time for us to revisit it. I don't think we're prepared to actually get into the specifics yet, but I think we're looking at that as well. I know we're going to be looking at that fairly soon, and we'll provide you with an update.
I'm just going to follow up. So we're potentially rolling this out with the updated and the synchronous, basically, e-learning if we need it, but it's not going to change the currently scheduled e-learning days until it does, but we don't know what that's going to be yet. So we're going to communicate one change, but then tell parents But certain e-learning days aren't going to be that and have to follow the old pattern. I'm just wondering how that communication and because it seems like a lot, because now I've got parents wondering, wait, is this the one where they've got to be on their iPad or is this just the one they've got to turn in work?
We'll be clear. These new expectations are for emergency closings at this time. I don't think we'll be mentioning that we're considering making changes to the monthly professional development days that are established. I'll be clear in our communication that those are separate.
And that one, to support what Ms. Bennett is saying, on something like that, we want to communicate the change and implement it during a natural break. So it wouldn't be next month, the monthlies are changing. I do feel like our parents can handle the emergency updated communication at this point in time, especially when we don't. I'm the jinx myself, but let's hope when those aren't regular. But I do think if we separate them, the initial communication on the emergency days wouldn't include anything about any changes on the other one because we haven't even formulated those yet.
Right, and I mean, our meeting is next week to talk about the PD days in more detail. I don't believe it would be our plan to make any changes to this year's calendar on those PD days because they're already scheduled out with content, but potentially for next year. So we would be communicating with families well in advance of any changes that we're making to the school calendar for next year as it relates to the staff professional development days.
And I'll let you guys, but one other, and I'm going to hog this question. Where we had it listed as plebeiac, wouldn't that just be for next year, just the kindergarten level? Instead of it being technically plebeiac, wouldn't that just be the kindergartens as they're in the homeschool, or or is there going to be two new or one new slide replacing the 1 to 5?
In reality, the plebeiac model and the elementary model are the same. The difference there is the starting time. That's it. We wanted to keep the daily starting time the same as a normal day so that our students know. Next year, we'll simply have a K-5 model and an EEC model, a K-5 model, a middle school model, a high school model, and a transition model. That'll just go away.
Thank you.
So is there an expectation? So if a school is closed based on weather, and the teacher would need to be teaching from home, correct? Okay. The other part is I'm really appreciating that attendance, that there's added rigor to it, and attendance is based on showing up. I dig that.
So I just wanted to clarify, so you're gonna be rolling this out for this year for the emergency closing days?
Correct.
And when was that again?
We're ready to go now, but we haven't communicated it. Tomorrow is the plan to do that. We just wanted to come through this board presentation first.
Okay, so what's in this packet is what we're gonna move to, correct?
Yes, with more
What-
detail though. So the schedules will be posted on the website, so there will be links to an actual schedule for their day. It won't be as general as you see in this presentation.
Is there any difference of what's presented here to what we've done currently or previously? I guess, it's great to see this, but what were we currently doing or previously doing with these e-learning days on emergency closings? What was really the expectation?
Yeah, so if you see that on the screen there, essentially it was all asynchronous. Teachers were expected to get lessons up prior to the beginning of the school day. Teachers were only expected to have 2 30-minute open hours, office hours, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And student attendance was based on whether or not they completed the given assignments within a week. So this is, I would say, a significant change in providing our students with additional support and face-to-face instruction.
Okay. Thank you.
Just one thing that I think may come up in 3 or 4 years, this idea of attendance. So what's interesting is with the way the state requirement is, You could have a student show up all 5 days at school and not do anything, not handing anything in, and they get full credit for attendance. Yet in this model, with it's almost like we have created opportunities, and I guess you could look at it as positive and maybe a challenge, but we've created so many opportunities for interaction between the teacher and student without being sitting right in the seat in the classroom. You could have a student who actually completes all of the work, hands it all in, reaches out to the teachers for a conference, yet they're marked as absent on those days. So I do, by the way, I don't love e-learning. I'm a purist. I believe you cannot replicate being in front and being in front of the teacher. But I also think if you look at where our kids are headed, we just talked in strategic planning about preparing kids for the future. Well, they don't do what we do in college. You don't show up every day. You have potentially A and B weeks. So I actually think at some point the state is going to revisit how attendance is calculated. So it's just my intuition. I've talked to other people about it. I'm like a logical individual, but if you have somebody that shows up, literally has a rear end in a seat for 5 days but doesn't do any work, what does attendance actually mean? So I'm always trying to think down the road. Obviously, we have support services here. We have counselors and support staff and those types of things where you have to be in person to get the support. But I think if you remember when we went into this, it's almost post-traumatic stress for me when we had to deploy like 3,000 devices in 2 weeks. Do you guys remember that? Where's Mr. Kozik? Is he around the corner? And so this idea of turning the screen on, turning it off, part of the reason we had it off, I don't know if you remember this, but the technology was new. We weren't sure about how students were going to react by having to turn the screen on. Everybody was home. Remember, I don't know if you remember all those types of things we had to deal with. Maybe some kids being embarrassed about having their screen on or being able to focus or whatever. So, but the attendance thing for me, we're trying to improve attendance. I actually think we're doing the right thing by having them turn the screen on. I will say there'll probably be an adjustment period. This actually might hurt our attendance because the student won't keep their screen on. But we're going to give it a shot and we'll update the board.
I apologize. I said I wasn't going to ask, but now I'm going to ask this one. So, where is that line going to be drawn now? Because especially with having the higher rigor for the emergency closing or the weather closing and to go to an e-learning day, how do we draw that line between what would have just been a snow day and we make it up down the road versus now you're basically saying, I don't care if it's a snow day, you get on your iPad. So how are we going to make that call on it?
That'll ultimately be my decision, bringing it to you. This is significantly better than what we had before, and we're going to see how it works. We're going to track attendance. I mean, I tracked on the, I remember the day we had the ice, but we had school. We had almost a 90% attendance rate on that day. So it was pretty good given what happened. In terms of individual teachers, we have not created a cutoff, out of the 25 minutes of synchronous, does the video screen have to be on 16 minutes to get marked for credit? We're going to rely on the teacher's judgment and be professional about what the student has going on. But like everything else, we're going to monitor it, we'll assess, we'll bring it back to the board for your consideration.
Any additional questions?
I do have one more. So in looking at the e-learning days for professional development, I know you said not this year, I get it, it's all planned out. Are we looking for something though for next school year?
Yes, that's the goal of our planning meetings coming up here. So our first official meeting is next week, late next week, to talk through what that could look like for 24-25.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jewett, anything?
Anything from the other three? Thank you very much. All right, next up is our Winter 24 map presentation.
I'm just going to hang out here and talk a little more. If that's all right with you guys. So as we identified in the fall, rather than one exceptionally long data presentation, we plan to come back periodically with relevant data for the board. So we took our winter map assessments in December, and I wanted to come and share some of our outcomes with you. I want to thank the teaching and learning team really helped specifically. Eileen Erisman puts a lot of time into helping prepare these, but we discussed these as a team, and a lot of our insights are not just from myself or Dr. Steffen, but really from our team. So what we'll be doing tonight is looking at some achievement numbers and looking at some growth numbers from fall map to winter map. Just some conclusions that I think you're going to see as we go, some things to consider as we look at the numbers. Overall, we did see better growth and achievement this winter than we have seen in years past. We have some theories on that. One, kindergarten data might be driven by, they have a relatively small class size this year, just based on staffing, and they are doing some new things with intervention that Dr. Steffen will get into a little bit later. We are in our second year of full implementation of our MTSS, or multi-tiered systems of support process, and so those systems have had time to develop. Additionally, we brought on branching minds to help us with data analysis and identifying the right students. So improved processes, we believe, are leading to improved implementation of interventions. We have an increased focus on MAP and IAR assessments in our school improvement process, largely driven by some of the school designation news that we got earlier this year. We have a more universal effort in student goal setting at the building level, working with students to understand where they are and where they should be. And then we are seeing more math improvement than we've seen in years past. And we think some of that might be driven by implementation of our hand-to-mind math resources that help support our K-5 teachers in providing solid instruction. So MAP, NWEA MAP is given to students kindergarten through 10th grade. We have 3 times a year, once at the beginning in August and September, once in December, and once in April and May. And they are assessed in reading and math. Our students in our dual programs in grades K through 4 do take the reading assessment in Spanish. So you will see that data on here also. And then data is available in a variety of capacities. We're going to be looking at achievement and growth today, and we're going to actually be drawing a line between the growth data we're seeing and how we are rated on our school designations. All right, so achievement is essentially where a student is, right? So after taking the test, students are given a scale score that falls between 100 and 350. Those scale scores are converted into percentiles. We really look at the percentiles more than we look at the scale scores, because it allows us to look at students as they performed against their grade-alike peers year over year. So while a student may grow on their scale score, all the other students are growing with them. So by looking at percentiles, we're able to compare them year over year against those peers. So those percentile ranks, compare them against each other. Students that are at about the 50th percentile are considered to be on grade, and students that are above the 70th percentile are projected to be college ready. So historically, we've presented those 2 benchmarks to help demonstrate where more of our students are. So if we look at our NWEA MAP math for the winter, as you look at this chart, the number on top demonstrates the total number of students above the 50th percentile. That's represented by the green. The blue represents students above the 70th percentile, and that total number is in the white there. So if you look at the top, if you look at kindergarten, I think it says 40 45, thank you. I need some really good glasses for this one. But it says 45. Of those 45% that are above the 50th percentile, 28% are above that 75th percentile. Does that make sense? Now, if you look at this, we kind of have a valley here. And I identified on the chart that these are the students that were in those primary grades during COVID. And this is somewhat of a national trend where math scores for that group are relatively low. A lot of the basic running theories have to do with people read to their kids every day. People don't naturally do math with their kids every day. I'm sure somebody does, all right? I'm sure there's somebody in the room that does. But as a general rule, we read our young children's stories. As you wander through the world, you see a lot of words. You don't see a lot of arithmetic. And so we think that a lot of those students missed out on some real foundational skills for math. But you do see a lot of our younger students are doing well. Kindergarten has some of the higher numbers. And as our students stay with us throughout their middle school and into their high school career, we see those numbers growing. We look at reading. Reading is a little more flat. Again, a little bit lower in the middle. And some of that may be driven by the same impact that we saw with COVID. Additionally, this number is a little bit different. All of our students are counted in the math number. This number only represents students that are in a monolingual class that took the English reading. All right? And then moving on, here is our Spanish reading. We only have dual language in grades 1 through 4. And so that's why we only have data in grades 1 through 4. Dr. Steffen, do you want to talk a little bit about language acquisition?
I was just going to say it's kindergarten through fourth, but it's okay.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out with the dual language data as we go through the presentation, we've been doing a lot of professional development with our dual teachers right now around the idea of when you're learning two languages, you actually might have a lot of information, but you can express some of it in one language and some in the other. So when we look at our data, what we are creating is a long-term plan on how we'll assess reading in English and in Spanish, because you really should be putting those two together. The best example is if a kid can count to 10, but they give you like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then they say 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They can count to 10, but they only knew some of the numbers in English and some in Spanish. So it's just something to consider when you're seeing this variation. We are seeing a lot of our dual language kids are simultaneous bilinguals, which means they're born here and have some families speaking English, some speaking Spanish. So they're acquiring both languages at the same time. So it's just, I wanted to point that out because you'll see more variance in our Spanish data throughout the presentation.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to looking at some median achievement. Median is a measure of the middle. Sometimes we use mean, which is the average. We use median because it helps avoid the skew of people way over on one end or of the spectrum or the other. It really helps us kind of see where the average student is. The other thing I want to point out is we have, and this is not us, right? MAP and most other assessments really put the students into quintiles, right? Every 20%. The difference between the student at the 48th percentile and the 50th percentile is possibly whether or not they liked what they had for breakfast, right? It's not a significant change. So as we look at these next few charts, really look at the trend based on the colors. The numbers matter, but oftentimes a swing of a few percentage points one way or another isn't really statistically significant.
And just to highlight that, it's really important because if you think about it, if you base it only on the 50 number, you could have a student get a 53%, which is at grade level, take the test 3 days later and get a 48. That is not a big swing, but in terms of a hard number, you would say, well, they didn't hit the benchmark. So the other thing that's really important, I think I'm correct on this, if you have students that are in the yellow, anywhere in the yellow, they would not be getting any tier 2 or tier 3 interventions. They're considered at grade level. So it's better to support Dr. Rowling's point is looking at bands of ranges is probably more appropriate to give a better, like an idea of what's actually happening.
All right, so yeah, as we move forward, the yellow would represent students that are considered to be at grade level. Green and blue represent students that are slightly above and significantly above, and then orange representing students slightly below, and red representing those students that are significantly below. Again, we're looking at the median. So as we move into these charts, and again, if you look at the trend of the colors, you see a decrease in reds, a general increase in oranges and yellows. So we view that, when we look at our general pattern, we view that as positive. There may be some variations up and down a little bit, but as a general rule, that shift is what we're looking for. We do see a little bit more change in math. That is something that, math has traditionally been a lower score for us. And so we are starting to see math catch up. So that's really great news. So as we look at that, that's our general trend there. And if we switch to reading, you see the same general trend. I do want to point out, we talk about looking for colors, but if you look at that top green square for Village first grade, it's 62, and it drops down to yellow for 59. 3 percentage points, and we have to have a cutoff somewhere. 3 percentage points, though, is not something we would view as potentially problematic, right? So not quite as much change in this chart, but we still see a general shifting from red to orange and from orange to yellow. And then as we look at our Spanish results, Spanish reading results, we again see increases in yellows, especially in the first grade. And we see a few more oranges than we had on the other end. So generally upward trends. There are some that have dropped, some that we are looking at and trying to find what the difference might be there. This is our middle school numbers. We don't see as much change in middle school. We didn't change much structurally. They don't have new resources. There's not that significant change in intervention practices that we have at the kindergarten level. So we haven't seen as much change in that. And then here's our reading for secondary schools, middle and high. As we move into growth, the next few charts is about as close as a leading indicator as we can find for that growth metric that we get from the state. So each student, when they take their assessment in the fall, they are given a growth target based on performance of millions of students around the country. The growth targets for MAP are still reflective of pre-COVID numbers. They're in the process of norming this year. So their norms will be changing for assessments next year.
Board, do you understand, I'm not sure that makes sense to you. Kurt, can you just, Reader's Digest version of MAP norming?
Right, so what they do is they look at the millions of students that take the test nationwide, and that's where, by taking those numbers, running the statistical analysis both on performance, achievement, that's how we come up with the percentile rankings, but also on growth. So they look and they say a student that had a scale score of 125 in second grade, on average, based on the millions of students we look at, should grow to a 140 by the time they get to their winter benchmark and to a 145 by the time they get to their spring benchmark. And that way we can look and track if our students are on pace. But as I identified, all of that statistical analysis is based on pre-COVID numbers. So because of the inconsistent assessment over the last couple of years, MAP put off, they generally re-norm every 3 to 5 years. They've put that off until this year. So it could be very likely, based on everything we went through with COVID, that those numbers would change in the future. I just want to make sure we're aware that these numbers are not necessarily as up to date as normally we'd like them, but it's what we have to work with, right? With the growth percentile, or with the growth numbers, essentially what they do is based off of this, years and years of statistical analysis, say a student that has hit this mark and then grown to, the mark B, compared to all of the other fourth grade students that had that initial scale score, this is how they rank based on how they scored again. The difference here is Illinois re-ranks every year. So when we talk about the IAR growth metric, every year they realign every single one. This is based off of a static metric, but quite honestly, it's as close as we can get at this time. So as we look at our growth percentiles, again, we're going to look at the median growth percentile. So we had kids on one end of this or the other, and we are looking at the same types of bands, with yellow being average, green and blue being above, and orange and red being below. So as we look at this, this is our math median conditional growth percentile by grade and by school. We have a lot to celebrate on this one. We have a lot of yellow, and we have some good green numbers. Those go back to some of those conclusions we talked about earlier in the presentation with improved interventions, with smaller class sizes at kindergarten, and maybe a bigger focus on this assessment. As we look at reading, it's a little more flat. We have a little more orange in there, and we are looking at some of those numbers. And one of the things we like to look at and say, okay, let's look at Beach, right? They're second grade, they're in the green. I can't quite read the number, but they're in the green. We have a bunch of other oranges, so we try to look and say, what are they maybe doing differently, right? This is kind of that PLC model, that professional learning community we talked about in the last presentation. How are we looking at what's happening there to see what might be just a little bit different to cause that kind of growth? So those are the conversations we have as a teaching and learning team, and looking at comparing these numbers and looking for maybe instructional practice or something else that might be adjusting that a little bit. And then here is our Spanish. Again, this is a much smaller group, so you will see a bigger variance here. The bigger the group, the less the variance. The smaller the group, the more spikes you would have for any of these metrics, quite honestly. So again, those are our conclusions. We talked about the kindergarten data. We've talked about improved implementation of our intervention systems and the use of branching minds. And the buildings are the school improvement teams are really looking at this data, really making it a focus this year. We have students looking at their goals, setting goals, and talking those through with their teachers. And we talked about the math, new math resources. So what's next? Pending board approval, we are bringing a number of K-5 curriculum resources over the next couple of months for math, ELA, English language arts, Spanish language arts, social emotional learning. Also pending board approval, we will be shifting from NWEA MAP to iReady for our benchmark assessments. That comes along with individual learning pathways that can help improve student outcomes. Also, through our research, it's more aligned to the IAR, so it should give us some more predictors. As we shift over, we'll look at how do we make some comparisons from this year of MAP to next year of iReady for the board. But we believe long-term that'll be a better assessment for the district. We are going to continue looking at our transition to partner schools. We believe that's going to help improve student outcomes as we support the developmental level of our students. We are evaluating our school improvement process and looking at how that might change for the 24-25 school year to be more aligned with our strategic planning and more aligned with some of the data that we're seeing. And then finally, we are preparing our students for our spring assessments. We have the IAR, the Illinois Assessment of Readiness. We have the Illinois Science Assessment, and we will have our spring map coming up in March and April. So we are working with our students to be prepared for those tests and looking at some test modules that help them with their experience, so it's not the first time they're seeing some of those things when they sit down for the test.
One additional thing before Dr. Rowling wraps it up, at the secondary level, high school specifically, we still have to finalize this, but there's going to be, I'm not sure we're not going to map test at 9th and 10th grade. We're going to shift to, we already do the SAT, but we're looking at the SAT suite 9, 10, 11. The positive is that's more rigor. It aligned, the freshman, sophomore version aligned to the junior version. The downside to that, there is a downside. It's not really a growth test. It's an achievement test, and we don't get the data back quick. But there's some things we can do locally when we get those results to plan for the subsequent year. So, at the secondary level, that will, I think, free up more time for instruction because we won't have 3 map testing windows. Dr. Rowling, that's fair, correct?
Yeah, and it's also important to identify that the number of kids taking the MAP test in grades 9 and 10 is significantly less than in grades K-8. So when we look at those numbers, it doesn't have quite the significance that we would get from an SAT where you have millions of students taking that test nationwide. So I would, that's essentially all I have unless Dr. Stefan wants to add anything. Otherwise, we're here for your questions.
So I'm recalling COVID had an impact, and basically there's this cohort of students that are going through. What we're seeing here with the numbers and the percentages, is it telling us that the growth because this is all in a curve, right? So it's all based on what's happening with their peers in other places and other places that they're getting tested with MAP. Do they need more interventions than we're giving them to basically excel? Because there's growth, it just may not be as fast as they need.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. I would say the argument could be yes, and part of the things that we're looking into to address that would be the iReady assessment that Dr. Mendoza mentioned with that individualized learning platform. That's been a big ask of the teachers over the last couple of years, is wanting to be able to have a program where there's a diagnostic assessment, says this is where there are gaps, and then specifically creates an individualized learning platform, and that's what the iReady assessment will provide. That was a given from our teachers going through this process. If we have to have something like that, because currently our teachers might be able to identify, here's our summative assessment, here's what, but then they individually for all up to 29 of their kids have to say, well, let me find the lesson for this and create it and do it for each kid. So that's a big piece of why we're also moving to iReady, to see if a program or a feature like that will help to fill some of these gaps. I do feel that our instructional philosophy with Mastery Learning supports when kids have gaps, but we're definitely needing to tackle and look at all kinds of ideas coming out of COVID. So that I would say right now, iReady will really help with that in the coming year to help us see if we continue to see growth, but also see some gains in that achievement piece.
The other thing to add to that, to support what you're saying, one of the reasons we're bringing forward curriculum adoptions, without getting too much in the weeds, we want more continuity and consistency to limit variability from teacher to teacher and from school to school. So we want to raise the floor, for lack of a better term, and give teachers more tools, because when our kids have the varying outcomes that they do without consistent resources, if you think of a classroom in all the different levels of the students, now you think of the feedback we got from the staff regarding planning, burnout. Are you literally developing, 20 different levels of support for 27 different kids? So I think with what we're doing, with what we're going to bring to you, I feel so good about where we're headed with this. So Lisa, I don't know,
No, I would definitely agree. I think because we've communicated to the teachers so far on the committees that we will be using with the curriculum resource we purchased, the assessments. So everyone is giving, right now everyone gives the same assessment, but it's written by the vendor. It's aligned to grade level. We've done a review in teaching and learning and shared with the teams the alignment to IAR to make sure that they're at grade level and make sure that the content in their units is within the IAR window. Because sometimes they'll throw in, for example, when we were doing math, one of our vendors had fraction units regularly in fourth quarter. Well, fractions are a huge piece of the IAR. So we looked really closely to make sure that the content they were covering within the IAR window of instruction were the heavy hitting topics that you saw in the IAR. Not that everything we teach isn't important, but we wanted to be, attentive and like thinking through in preparation for our kids with these assessments.
Now, are the assessments and the intention, is that mostly up through fifth grade, or what's the?
For the curriculum adoptions, those are K through 5 for right now. I know in math already, we do have a curriculum vendor. We use Carnegie Learning, and let's come here many times, and that will end at the end of next year. So secondary math, we'll be talking about resources, but what Don was referring to is our K-5.
But I will say that the iReady assessment and the associated individual learning path, it will be a K-8 product. So all of our students will have access to those growth opportunities, and the curriculum adoption would just be K-5.
Because the front end of that cohort is going to hit seventh grade next year, so that's where got it.
And I'll say I worked with iReady in my previous positions as a principal. We utilized that individual learning path. We did see some significant improvements for our students, and that was at the middle school level.
Additional questions from the board?
I have a question. Is this more helpful getting something smaller, more frequent than,
Yes.
52 slides or whatever? So we'll just keep doing it that way.
Thank you.
Hey, Michael, I actually got a different question. There seems to be a wrestling team but there's not a place for wrestling.
Well, when we get to public comment that you're slowing us down for? All right, next up is contracts under 1,000. We didn't have anything on that one, so we will skip right over that. And any questions for the administration in regards to the FOIA report?
Oh, no questions, thank you.
All right, then next up is public comment. Members of the public may participate in public comment during regular board meetings by attending in person or by submitting an electronic public comment form. Please note that the speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Electronic public comments will be accepted up until noon on the day of the regularly scheduled meeting, and the public commenter will be contacted to confirm identity. Once confirmed, the electronic public comment will be provided to all board members in written form. A link to the electronic public comment is online. There was no electronic public comment, but we do have public comment that has been turned in today, and the first one up for that is Mrs. McCain. Speaking of wrestling, and make sure you hold down the button.
You guys have to know I hate speaking. So, I've had a kid in the district at the high school level for 13 years. I've had a student athlete at the Round Lake High School wrestling team for 9 years. And for the last 3 years, we've had a female student athlete for Round Lake's girls wrestling team. In the 2021-22 IHSA held its inaugural season of girls wrestling. IHSA has treated girls wrestling as its own sport, separate from boys wrestling, just as boys basketball is separate from girls basketball, boys tennis is separate from girls tennis, boys soccer is separate from girls soccer. The IHSA that year recorded 1,249 girls in its first year, with 517 participating in sectionals. That same year, Round Lake High School girls wrestling had 10 girls, 2 of which qualified for state. 1 placed at the state tournament. The other one is currently competing in college at a D2 university. In 22-23, IHSA doubled participation with 2,215 girls and 908 participating in sectionals. Round Lake High School had 11 girls, 2 of which qualified for state, 1 placed, becoming the first athlete, male or female, in school history to place at state more than once. This year, IHSA has not released their numbers yet for how many are participating. However, they did add regionals to qualify for sectionals. Round Lake High School hosted a regional site for the inaugural season and of regionals and qualified 5 of our 15 girls to move on to sectionals. With girls wrestling being recognized a sanctioned sport, our girls need and deserve the undivided attention of a dedicated girls head coach and a dedicated girls assistant coach. In the 9+ years that I've been associated with the high school wrestling program, we've had the same number of coaches. A 1 head varsity boys coach, 1 assistant boys varsity coach, 1 assistant boys junior varsity coach, and 1 assistant boys freshman coach. Please don't get me wrong, Noah Shoestaff, the junior varsity coach, has stepped up and taken our girls to every single tournament but one because he was sick in the 3 years we've had a program. But the girls do not have a coach undivided for them during practice. And you can tell they're just not getting the instruction that they need and deserve. This season, the middle school level in our district, there's 6 female wrestlers at Round Lake Middle, there's 10 at McGee. We're only losing 2 girls at the high school to graduation, so there's potential for a lot of girls to come in next year. And that doesn't include the girls that our team is recruiting right now. Nationally, there are 45 out of 50 states have adopted and sanctioned women's wrestling, with more than 150 colleges adding it as a varsity sport at the D1, D2, and D3 levels. So there is potential for these girls with scholarships and just unbelievable opportunities. But we need to make sure we're giving them the building blocks they deserve. So what I'm doing right now is asking you to please consider opening up 2 coaching positions for next year, a varsity girls and a varsity girls head coach and an assistant coach, so we can make sure that we stay ahead of the game for our girls. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ms. McCain, somebody will follow up with you from the district central office, and we'll follow up with the school board. Obviously, we appreciate the McCains and the other wrestlers for coming here, so we appreciate it.
And while we've got still people here before everybody blows out the backside of the door, any additional public comment?
Thank you for supporting them as much as you guys have.
Yep, and looking forward to the girls with this weekend at Evanston with sectional at Evanston. 5 girls there, and then we qualified 4 boys that'll be going to the Barrington sectional following week. So thank you very much for all of that. All right, then next up we will move to superintendent's report and turn it over to Dr. Mendoza.
Thank you, Board President Francisco and School Board. As the board is aware, we are working through a curriculum resource adoption process this school year in social emotional learning, math, English, and Spanish language arts. Our math committee completed the process on January 31st. After a thorough and comprehensive review, the math curriculum committee has reached a decision regarding the selection of our new math curricular resource as iReady Classroom Mathematics. The committee, composed of 33 dedicated educators across the district, carefully examined offerings from 6 different publishers, which led to an in-depth evaluation of the top 2 options selected by the committee. The process involved a detailed review of each publisher's materials, feedback from our educators, and a rigorous examination of how well each option aligned with our educational goals and standards. In the final stages, the committee based their recommendation on their meticulous consideration of various factors, including committee feedback, programming needs, pacing, the Illinois Assessment of Readiness, alignment, outside district feedback, and publishing dates. Furthermore, the committee sought external input by gathering feedback from other districts that have experience using the iReady classroom mathematics resource. This additional perspective allowed us to gain valuable insights into the practical application and effectiveness of the resource in diverse educational settings. This process has been extremely collaborative between members of the teaching and learning department, building administrators, and our leadership. We look forward to bringing a recommendation to the board regarding the math adoption. That will also include funding. So just to reassure the board. Strategic planning sessions, I would like to acknowledge the work of our school board members and all strategic plan committee members as we look to wrap up the last planning session this Thursday. The commitment devoted by each member of the team will be a testament to the overall quality of the plan. Thank you to all who have been involved along every step of the way. We're also excited to share that the hard work of Kim Miller, the K-12 Health and Wellness Department Chair, Sarah Fontana, the T&L Teaching and Learning Coordinator for English Language Arts and Wellness, and both building administrative teams, students at McGee and Round Lake Middle will have access to a state-of-the-art fitness room to support our students and athletes in their wellness journeys. These new changes will help better prepare students for their high school experiences. While Round Lake Middle School has had a dedicated space for some fitness activities, the limited equipment was in despair and unusable in many cases. McGee Middle School has not any flexible space or equipment for students in that area. Both spaces will offer cardio and strength training equipment such as air bikes and ellipticals, weight benches, and resistance training equipment with appropriate storage. In addition to the new equipment, composition rubber flooring will be installed, ensuring safety of our students and longevity of the equipment. We were able to make these spaces happen through Title I carryover funds. The anticipated completion date is May 1. Below is a rendering of the new fitness rooms. The multilingual department was notified in January that we are going to receive the Title III Immigrant Student Education Program grant. Allocations for this grant are based on the ISBE final 2024 budget and the total current year enrollment of newly enrolled immigrant students in the district. The district was awarded $18,000 to support educational programming for newcomers. That's a long one, but it concludes this month's superintendent's report.
Thank you for that, Dr. Mendoza. Any questions from the board for Dr. Mendoza?
I do have one. In relation to the middle school weight rooms, what are the locations within the buildings that those will be? And then in using Title I carryover funds, what is the cost of what we're utilizing from that carryover to do these build outs?
I can definitely get you the exact counts, but I want to say it's around $50,000 for the two different rooms with the equipment and the flooring. As far as where they're located, McGee has off of their gym a multi-purpose room. That's where they placed it. That previously had to be used for health because of the number of students in the building and the number of needed classrooms. But as our enrollment has gone down, they don't have as many kids. They don't need as many actual classroom spaces, so health can be taught in a different room. At Round Lake Middle, to be honest, I don't know the exact location, but I know that they currently already have a fitness room set aside, and it's pretty rough. If really needed to be updated, the equipment is not in great shape, so it's that space that we're redoing and using it in the same purpose, but with much, much better facilities. But I can get you the quote.
Yeah, we'll get both of those and get it to the full board.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Hearing none, I'll just make a point that everybody left while Dr. Mendoza was talking, just FYI. All right, next up then is committee reports. Community Engagement Committee update.
Okay, bear with me. Okay, we met tonight, and the first item that we discussed was administration brought forth a proposal for cell phone policy for secondary students for the year school year 24-25. I highly encourage everyone to read the attachment in the packet. lots of information in there. We raised some questions regarding the elementary policy and how policy may read for secondary students, along with the associated costs related to equipment needed to follow this new policy. And we are waiting on our recommendation until we receive more information on those items. The next item that we discussed was the referral GPS program, which is an online referral program for therapies. This service is currently being paid for by the Regional Office of Education through 6/30/26. The service is free for students who are unhoused. There are multiple providers. It allows students access to multiple providers who speak Spanish and other languages. You can find it on our website under student services under the mental health tab. And Dr. Apgar was going to get us analytics. Our website launch, we already went through that. We found opportunities for some tweaking here and there. Let's see. The teacher communication tool recommendation. The communications team is requesting the board support a 1-year agreement with Remind to be used at the secondary school level starting July 1st, 2024. This would replace Blackboard. Currently, the elementary school uses Dojo. We had asked questions previously, and that at the level that we use Dojo, there is no charge. We currently We currently use Remind for athletics and activities, and this new contract would be at a cost of approximately $4 a student. It would result in additional cost of $1,332 annually. Formal request for the Remind agreement will be brought to the Finance Committee on February 26th. And we had a partner school update. We reviewed the communication channels and timeline. Sorry, I lost my place. Student school assignments went out via email on January 31st. There was a small glitch with some of the students. The emails didn't go out, and so those went out Friday. I lost my place. We're going to follow up with those families on Thursday. So I believe that's what.
So we have a direct mail of the notifications going out in tomorrow's mail, I believe, and then on Thursday we're backpacking the same notice with the students at the incoming K through 5 level.
And then we reviewed the monthly informational snapshot and social media analytics. We were going to get more of a rubric put together for what we'd like to see on the snapshot. Like to see a lot more community engagement related items and high level athletic dates. And that's all I have if anybody has any questions.
Any questions?
Has there been any chatter from the partner school communication?
Questions about the placements, or so we've made available, we call it a partner school inquiry form. So any families that have questions about the process itself, they could submit questions through that. And then we created an internal document for the schools last week. So if they were receiving questions at the building level that they were not able to answer, that they could put it into that document, and we're responding in the same way. So within 48 business hours, we'll get back to those parents who have questions about placement.
Has that been getting utilized a lot or no?
given the number of families and students that we have, no, we're not getting a ton of questions. But they're good questions that are coming through. Most of them are, since the start, we released that I think in November. Questions are really coming from families who will have children in two schools now with the K-2 and the 3-5 model. Some of the questions that came through this week or last week, late last week on the placements had to do with program placements. So sometimes we have within our special education programming or newcomer programming, they may not be at their new home school. They may be placed somewhere else. So just clarifying why they might be at a school outside of their partner school zone.
Any additional questions? As I'm just trying to stretch out the time now.
So it's not my fault this time.
Not this time. No, this time it is not your fault. In fact, this would have been the good time right now to put it in while we're waiting to be able to move on to
That would have been
open meeting. All right, next up is going to be approval of open meeting minutes, but we just need to wait for Secretary McGinley. And so, pause. They don't call him the best in the business for nothing over there. I'll just chime in, jump ahead a little bit to our positive occurrences. We kind of touched on it already. Good, there we go. Never mind. I'll do positive occurrences later. All right, next up is approval of open meeting minutes.
I need a motion to approve the January 11th, 2024 special meeting strategic planning session 1 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Lee. Roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee? Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the January 18th, 2024 special meeting strategic planning session 2 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Larson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee? Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the January 22nd, 2024 regular board meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Lee. Roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee? Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the January 25th, 2024 special meeting strategic planning session 3 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Lee. Roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee? Yes.
Motion carries. Which brings us to new business. And the first one up on new business is our Embrace contract.
I need a motion to approve the contract with Embrace for IEP, Individual Education Plan, and 504 Plan Management in the amount of $16,000 to be funded by the IDEA funds.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Larson, seconded by Mr. Jewett. Roll call, please. Any questions?
I was just gonna,
Finance?
yeah, I was just gonna add, so this did come to finance, and it was reviewed. Asking, questions with, the transition of, going into a new software, teacher feedback, going through technology, for SAPA requirements, and then regarding some contract questions. Dr. Epgar.
I would be remiss if I didn't say that Dan did a great job working with the vendor to give us a waiver on the secure file transfer and the single sign-on for next year. It's in the contract for now. It's out next year as sort of a good faith measure, and then it'll be back in. But Dan did a great job.
Okay, that's good. And I think that request really came forward because of the request from finance, because I just felt that those fees were unnecessary. Thank you.
Hearing no additional questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee? Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve a personal inventory decrease of 5.0 administrators and a personal inventory increase of 2.0 administrators as presented.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Mr. Tavera. Any questions?
Just
Clarification?
just very briefly, the reason we need to do it this way is because of the change in the job description. The net result is savings to the district. Respectfully asking you approve it so we can get these two positions posted and filled.
Anything from finance?
No, finance did have discussions with Dr. Mendoza and administration regarding the decrease and increase of positions, how that affects the budget. So those conversations were had and is comfortable in supporting this.
Thank you. Hearing no additional questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee? Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the request for an additional 1.0 FTE HR specialist in the amount of $41,858 out of district funds.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Mr. Tavera.
And again, this was brought to Finance Committee. This is an additional human resource specialist with the amount of employees that HR services and different mandates that have come forward. And the board may recall Faith's Law that is most recent. Those requirements on that department is taxing and is really in need of an additional person. So what you see in front of you is at least that salary requirements for this half or about half a year. That's not a full year's salary.
That's the prorata. Thank you. Hearing no additional questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee? Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the 4-year lease with Midwest Transit for 53 buses commencing in July of 2024 in the amount of $1,490,492.00 to be paid out of Fund 40, the Transportation Fund.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mr. Tavera, seconded by Mr. Jewett.
Thank you. Again, this was reviewed by Finance Committee. You may recall this was pulled last meeting due to weather. getting the bid. So this is a little bit of an increase from last year, and you'll see it's 53 buses. This does include having an additional 6 buses as we move to a partner school model, and we'll have more of a direct route. This also includes some new specifications that we've asked on for our buses. It's called a STAR seats, which is student transportation and restraint seats for our little children. Currently, when they want to take field trips, our buses cannot support that, so we subcontract that. So obviously we want to move that back in-house. Also includes some safety features as backup cameras. Our buses, when they leave the bus barn, they don't currently have that, and we just need the cameras. Also, it'll include LED lighting on the lower part of the buses at night, as we know our students, and even when we use our buses for community events that are held at the Civic Center. So they'll be illuminated, so it's not so dark as you're approaching the bus, which I think would be a great feature. And then to have the grate on the front of the bus to match the bus, it is an additional cost. It's $5, but we do need to have. We want the buses to look nice. And then Dr. Kivens, with their savvy negotiation, we had a bus that was out of service, and she was able to get that warranty for free for next year. And that's it. So again, a little bit of an increase for some of those additional safety features that are needed for the bus. And then, of course, the additional 6 buses that are needed with the new school year.
Just a quick question that probably came up in finance. Is there any kind of how much we may, quote unquote, save by because of the increases and going to the STAR seating, of what we're going to be able to offset that by the fact of not having to contract out that transportation?
Dr. Kivens?
So I can get exact numbers to you when the little students, the elementary students go on field trips. That's when we need the seatbelts and those other things. So I can get into information. I wouldn't say it's a large amount, but it gives us the flexibility to do it in-house with our drivers first.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd still be a great number to get back to us just to see that. Yeah, it's not going to completely offset it, but
No.
it gives us that flexibility to be able to do it. So
Exactly, yeah.
which is
With,
awesome.
with the addition of 6 additional buses, that is not going to put a dent in it.
All right, hearing no additional questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee? Yes.
Oh, was that everybody? Motion carried.
All right, onto the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda for the accounts payable report for $1,168,806.04 and the February 5th, 2024 employment report.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Lee. Roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee? Yes.
Motion carries, which brings us to introduction of administration and Dr. Lamping.
Thank you, President, Mr. Francisco. It is with great pleasure that I introduce Mr. Chris Bryant as the Facilities Night Supervisor. Mr. Bryant was selected from a very highly talented pool of candidates to support, manage, and lead our 31 night custodial staff that have the responsibilities of providing the primary cleaning for our 15 facilities. Chris attended North Chicago High School. After graduating high school, he went to Morton College on a basketball scholarship, which is where he met his fiancee, Jada. He has 4 lovely children, Aaliyah, Kennedy, Cameron, and Kalia. Together, Jada and Chris recently put down roots by purchasing a house in Antioch. In his spare time, he enjoys fishing, playing basketball, traveling with his family, and cooking. What really attracted Chris to the interview team was his relational experience with employees and various strategies to work completion. Chris prioritized making a difference every day at work, building good teams, and leading by example. Most recently, Chris manages 18 custodians daily and 12 grounds members when needed at the Southern Wisconsin Center. Ted and I are very excited to have him join the facilities team, department staff, and the District 116 family. We'd like to introduce Mr. Chris Bryant.
Good evening, everybody. So, as Dr. Larry was saying, my name is Chris Bryant. I'm excited to be here. Grateful for the opportunity, and can't wait to get to work and meet my team. Meeting them tomorrow, and I got a lot of things I want to present. So, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited to be here. I'm trying to hold it in, but yeah, I'm excited to be here. So, thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right, next up is what I alluded to earlier, positive occurrences.
Okay, I have some. This weekend, I got to attend the pancake breakfast with a couple of my children. That it was a collaboration between ATYB and our Round Lake High School baseball team. It's baseball, softball, ATYB. Two of my three kids grew up through ATYB baseball and they played baseball from 2008 to 20, well, would have been 2020, but not so much. It was great to see the turnout. I thought it was a great turnout. And also, the community members also were cooking pancakes and sausage. And like Mr. Francisco said, we recently hosted the girls IHSA wrestling regionals in our gym, which was fabulous to see. And Mr. Francisco also worked the meet. He was the towel boy on the floor. It was great to see. And our girls did fantastic. We have four or five heading to 5 regionals this weekend. And it was great to see.
Yeah, just to piggyback on the pancake breakfast, I attended that as well as my whole family. My son and daughter played through ATYB, and my husband served on that board for at least a decade. But it was a great community event. I know we've mentioned about drawing in our parents and community and athletics, also making that connection to our feeder groups. So that was the best of both worlds, and I thought they did a great job, and I didn't have to make breakfast. So that was a great event. It was also girls basketball senior night later that Saturday morning, early afternoon. And again, that was very well done. And then was also a trivia night for the Fine Arts Boosters on Sunday that, again, my family attended. Great turnout of alumni as well. It looks like they did a great job raising funds.
We also had the athletic Hall of Fame induction.
Oh, that's right, on Friday, yes.
On Friday. which was great. We had the induction of, you're gonna have to remind me on the years,
85,
86.
86 football
Football.
team. That's the first
And
one to go to state.
1990 for Mr. Gilly for the wrestling.
Correct, Mr. Jason Gilly, which will lead me to that. The wrestling team invited him in to speak to the team. And I know Mr. Gilly really enjoyed doing that and meeting our current wrestlers who he himself still wrestles as an adult. And he holds some pretty severe, or some, like I think world titles. So he still wrestles to this day. Not Hulk Hogan, like jujitsu and some other stuff. I mean, I'd have to look it up,
I don't know adults that do.
Actually, the adult circuit on that runs all the way into 70s and 80-year-olds. And
It's not 70 or 80, let me
No.
just clarify.
Also, our high school chess team is headed to state finals for the third year in a row, and they did awesome. It was held over at that place that I work at, and they did great over there, just saying.
Then boys wrestling qualified for sectionals, which we already touched on that. Yep. And then also I'll throw out there, definitely it's still been great to see the community and student, especially the student engagement at our strategic planning meetings. We've got our final one coming up on Thursday. Mixed blessings there. I'm kind of happy to have Thursday back myself, but at the same point, definitely going to miss having that feedback and that interjection. Yeah, exactly. So definitely a great job there, and looking forward to seeing how we wrap that up this week. All right. So next up, we will now move to future agenda items. Anyone have any additional future agenda items they would like to add to the future agenda?
I have one. I was wondering if we can get an update regarding twilight tutoring. And then I have been seeing the two middle schools speak of SOAR. Are those two connected?
We had also talked about with the, shoot. What's that group that used to be here that's no longer here? Thank you. Yeah, what are we doing to bridge the gap at this point?
All right, hearing no additional future agenda items, we will move to approval of some closed session minutes.
I need a motion to approve the release of previously unreleased closed session minutes from January 2022 through June 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Lee. Roll call, please.
Mr. Devera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee? Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the destruction of closed session audio recordings from June 2022 and prior.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Devera, seconded by Ms. Lee. Roll call, please.
Mr. Devera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yeah.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee? Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve closed session minutes of the January 8th, 2024 regular board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Lee, seconded by Mr. Jewett. Roll call, please.
Mr. Devera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yeah.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee? Yes.
Motion carries. All right, which will bring us to convening closed session, which I need to pull that up very fast. Perfect. I need a motion to convene in closed session as permitted by statute 5 ILCS 120/2 for the purpose of discussing the following. 1, real estate matters, 5 ILCS 120/2C5. Collective negotiating matters, 5 ILCS 120/2C2. Employment matters, 5 ILCS 120/2C1. And closed meeting minutes, 5 ILCS 120/2C21.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Larson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee? Yes.
Motion carries. That will take us to closed session. We will not have an open session coming out, so that will bring us to the end of our evening online. Thank you for attending, and we look forward to you at our next meeting, which should be the 19th. Thank you.